Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Bina007 Movie Reviews, where I'm joined by my long-time now collaborator, Matthieu.
Hi everyone.
Matthieu is also part of Vassals of Kingsgrave, which is a podcast of all things geeky that can be found at VOK Podcast. But today I'm super excited because we're going to talk about a film that I saw when I was very, very little at a cinema. It's the 1984 classic Neverending Story, which I have huge nostalgia for. A film directed by Wolfgang Petersen about a little kid who discovers a magic book that takes him to a fantasy world. And actually, really, if you think about all the stuff I love these days, like Lord of the Rings, it's very similar. So I'm also kind of interested because I'm talking about it today with Matthieu, who watched it not as a child. So that's going to be interesting. So we're going to start off not if you have it on DVD or on demand, not at the Warner Brothers logo, but actually at the first title page of the opening credits. So it should have a red swirling background and the words Warner Brothers and producers sales organization present. So I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, go, and hopefully we'll be synced up. So 3, 2, 1, go. So Matthieu, I said that I was very nostalgic about this film, although I didn't read it because it's a very famous children's book as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about? Oh my God, the Le Mans song! Oh, makes me so
Uh,
nostalgic. I still have this as a tune. It's a great, great song.
yeah, I own the soundtrack for the movie, but apparently, I mean, from what I could gather, the soundtrack, it's the song itself is not on the movie soundtrack itself.
It's like a mega hit. I think I knew about the
Yeah,
song before the film.
no, yeah, I remember that at least with for reviews of the film, everyone sort of uses that song when they make a review of it, like on YouTube videos or something like that, because it's just so catchy, actually.
Yeah, it's still a classic, classic pop hit. So how did you get into the film? Because I think I'd assumed maybe because I think of you as German as having maybe read the book as a kid because it's such a, I mean, it's a German production. It's based on a
Hmm.
German story, German director, filmed in Bavarian
Yeah.
studios. So
I think to me, it's like I've always been sort of aware of the film in the back of my mind because I think as a kid I think I saw um, some kind of animated series about Bastian that was about the never-ending story and that
Bastian
way,
Balthazar Bucks, brilliant name.
yeah. So I was aware of the film when I was younger, but I didn't actually watch it because it was for me it was not very easy to find the film on DVD or something like that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because even now when I go into DVD shops and stuff like that, it's very difficult to.
Because it feels to me like in England this was always on TV. I wonder if one of the kind
Uh,
of mainstream TV channels had bought the rights, and it just felt like it's one of those nostalgia watches. Like even now, like at odd times, maybe 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, if you're flicking channels, you might come across it, and it's one of those films that I'll never switch off.
and I haven't read the book, but I intend to because it's generally the kind of story that I enjoy. Sort of like this fantasy setting and
Hmm.
flying dragons and that sort of thing. Um, yeah,
Oh, the
but
yuppie dad is so mean. It's so 80s, isn't it, to have this sort of like
yeah.
investment banker dad sort of ignoring his young kid and just like wordlessly open his jar of jam.
Yeah, and actually, from what I understand in the book, the relationship is actually key to how the story ends.
Really?
Yeah, because apparently, like it has to do with the fact that in the book, Bastian gets to make lots of wishes, and he forgets one thing about himself each time he makes a wish. Um, and by the end, sort of, he has made so many wishes that he only remembers his own name and his parents and that
Okay.
sort of thing. And so that's I guess if you would, I mean, but that goes way beyond what the film does.
Yeah,
But
no, the dad
because
is barely in it, right? I mean, I
yeah,
love his like yuppie power breakfast of orange juice and an egg.
because this is a good thing to maybe point out that the film has a different ending than the book, and it sort of ends at the halfway point of the book because
Yeah.
the
But then
book.
there's films that go on, right? There's Neverending Story 2 and 3, which I've never seen.
Yeah, these are awful, awful movies from what I can
Really?
understand. So I never actually attempted to watch them. Um, and I think the fact that it ends like halfway through the book's story um, is very interesting because Bastian at the end of the film is still a sympathetic character, whereas in the book it's sort of from there it goes into all his wish making and that sort of thing, and then
Oh,
it's
okay.
about him sort of changing Fantasia to suit his own desires and his own needs and etc. And so he makes it into a place where he is the hero and sort of thing, and he actually becomes quite antagonistic.
Gosh.
Which I find very interesting. But the film, for obvious reasons, maybe didn't want to attempt that kind of complex storytelling with the main character because you're rooting for the kid, and then it turns out he's actually the it's like a villain order. It's like a sort of villain origin story, something like that, where he's like getting so much power that he can actually that he gets drunk on it in a way.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like his social
I mean, it makes a lot
options.
of sense, but it just
Yeah,
like it's such an uplifting story that that would be just such a downer. So
yeah.
what's the deal with his mum? Are they? I can't remember. Are they divorced?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, he's gonna get bullied now.
Yeah. Those kids are not, I mean, those kids are gonna get. I mean, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened at the end, like with in the last scene. Like, why wasn't this in the papers anywhere? But
Oh dear. This little kid I find really it's weird because he's such a good actor. I remember when I was I guess kind of his age when I watched the film, if not much younger, and he was also in this really excellent sci-fi movie called Daryl, where he
yeah.
plays a little boy who's like a robot.
Mm.
A bit like a Pinocchio story, but classic 80s sort of
So,
future
so
tech horror. And then he just didn't really do much. I think he became like a
oh,
wood print maker or something later in life.
okay.
Had a very happy and fulfilled life outside of Hollywood, and just
Yeah.
but it's just a shame. He was such a great actor for a little kid. But I think it's a good story in the end because he's not one of these child stars who ended up really messed up. He's just had like a really good life. So
Yeah. Just like Jack Leeson, apparently. Because Jack Leeson, obviously.
he
Uh,
seems so grounded, right?
yeah.
Like I'm just going to do my philosophy PhD and whatever.
Yeah. No, but that's a fine stance to have. I
I
mean,
think so too.
don't let it get to your head when you're young. That's the thing. If you have an alternative that you want to do, then just do it. I mean, it's because otherwise, and child stars particularly are,
It
they
never
are
ends well.
they tend to be known for one thing and one thing only because people love, for example, the Neverending story so much. I don't. It's difficult to break away from that once you get even when you get older and do other stuff. So it's
Tough.
maybe a good thing that he didn't. I mean,
I think the actor who plays Atreyu never really broke away and still does the odd convention. And
uh,
oh, but this to me, this is why I love this book, because this story, because it's a story about bookshops and bookshops being magical places full of magical knowledge, and anything can happen when you open the pages of a book. Because I think all us book nerds immediately, this is the kind of story we want to be in.
yeah, and you mentioned Lord of the Rings as well. So it's like hey,
Yeah.
to the big. I, and it's also interesting because Lord of the Rings only came to the US. I mean, it was only like in the 1970s when it came out, right? So it's not that much later. It's like 1980s. So it's still a big influence in the sense that it made it into other fantasy films and stories. The honorable mention now and then. But
Well, I think certainly the fact that I love Lord of the Rings, which I really do, and all that kind of fantasy literature, which I read after watching this film, comes from this film. I think this is the film that
oh,
introduced me to a lot of the stuff that shaped what I responded to later on in life. This and Star Wars basically is the sort of the twin totems of my youth. Because this came out the same year as Empire Strikes Back, I think. Not Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi.
mhm.
So this and that, yeah, absolutely. Bookseller's actually quite creepy.
Ah, yeah.
Do you know what he's like in the books?
Oh, I think he's socially awkward in the book. Um, it's yeah. We talked about the bullies earlier. I think when you're a kid, that sort of experience shapes you a lot. To me, it's like, the scene in the film is a bit more like, uh, let's say generally, how you perceive bullies to be, but in the real world, it's always a bit more about, I guess, indifference to other people. When people don't really pay attention to you,
Hmm.
you sort of tend to, uh, you want them to notice you. And bullying, in a way, is like, if you get some people, if they get no attention, they are much more likely to feel sad about it than if they get negative attention. Like when someone bullies you, you tell yourself, well, at least they know I exist, this sort of thing.
Mm.
Whereas when they ignore you, and you don't feel like you are part of you know the conversation at all. That's also a different way of hurting people in a
That's
way.
such a mischievous smile on the bookseller's
Yeah,
face when he
it's
realizes he's taken the book.
yeah, and it's like this story is about imagination, in the sense that, because that's the crux of the story, is like, because people don't have imagination, everything breaks away in the fantasy world of Fantasia, or Fantastica, I think, is as it's called in the book. So it's
Hmm.
different. Um, but yeah, but it's also interesting because the book apparently is written like in different colors, like red and green, depending on where you are in the story. If you are in the real world, apparently it's one color, and if you are in the fantastic world, it's red or something.
When I was a kid, I used to dream of being able to do this, like where you could just be in a school where the teachers were so lax that you could basically bunk off for the day and just read a book in the attic. Like in my school, there was
Yeah.
just like no way you could have got away with that. We had
No.
register at the start of each class. There's just, yeah, it just wasn't going to happen.
No, that's true. I mean, but at the same time, it's like that this would be on your day off, let's say, or if you have like classes that you don't need to go, don't need to get to because the teacher's not there today, or is ill or something like that. Then you would just go to the school library and start reading.
Just never happened.
No, I mean, uh, yeah, no, I generally brought my own books to school. So it's like, I didn't need to go to any library or something like that. I just, would bring my own books. And when I had free time, I would sit down somewhere and read it. But yeah, not as unaware of the time as Bastian is, apparently.
Yeah, he has to be a hero with a name like that as well.
Hmm. Oh yeah, here we enter.
And it's so creepy. I think the other thing that really gripped me as a child is, as a child, I mean, this the little snail is
Hmm.
like really friendly, and this was all very Alice in Wonderland to me, like the Mad Hatter and the bat and the snail, but it was also really scary. Like this concept of nothingness was just
Yeah.
really petrifying, and it's almost like Empire Strikes Back when you go into the cave when Luke goes to train with Yoda, and then he sees Vader in there. Like it's that creepy
Hmm.
and that horrible. I mean,
Yeah.
this is grim. The
Yeah.
steamroller. I had bad dreams about the steamroller of
Uh,
doom.
yeah, it's the rock biter.
Yeah, but he's so cute in the end, right? He's like Andre the Giant. So
Yeah, something very, very reassuring in a way, but at the same time, it's like, you have a big creature like that who is unable to do anything against the nothing.
exactly.
Um, and
How do you find the makeup and stuff? I think it still
oh,
holds up, actually.
yeah, it's actually, I like the fact it holds up, I think, in my opinion, because it's practical effects.
Yep.
Because if it was CG, at some point the technology would would look outdated, compared to what you have in current, like, CG effects. So it's like you would always compare it to that. Whereas it with practical effects, there's actually something there that they shot on film. So it's very it's very different in a way. Because it's either costumes, or it's, props or whatever. They're actually there. So, once you film it, they never change. That's just all, it's all that there is. Um, yeah, so I really enjoy the inventiveness of what you can do with, costumes and that sort of thing and makeup.
And had the Bavarian studio, because you've been there, did they
Yeah.
have experience in doing this kind of work? Because it's like, today you go to Weta, or there are places you go to, like in the 80s and 90s, ILM would have been that place. Because
Oh,
this is really cool stuff.
well, I think that this is one of I mean, this is rare in a sense that it is it's a German fantasy. It's a German co-production, so it's a German. It's a fantasy film like with props, but it has international renown, right? That's not something that you generally see because most big scope and scale fantasy comes from I think mostly I mean most of those that I'm aware of come from English speaking countries, like if you look at Time Bandits or if you look at Lord of the Rings or something like that, they all come from either English productions or it's like it's really to me that was very very strange when I found out that it was actually a German studio, like Bavaria Studios, who made the creatures and everything. Because when I went there, they had props of Falkor and the big turtle,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. So I'm not actually sure if they are like Weta or something like where they are renowned for doing that kind of stuff specifically. But I think it's very telling that it's a film that had a lot of appeal and lots of success outside of Germany with when it was typically it's not I don't think that there are lots of fantasy films where you go, oh yeah, that's from Bavaria Studios or something like that. It's mostly, I think, yeah,
And it's a
things like
huge
what.
risk for them, I think, because I was
Hmm.
watching in preparation for this on Sky Arts, which is like our satellite channel. They have interviews with lots of great directors where they do retrospectives of their careers. And they had one on demand with Wolfgang Petersen, the director,
Hmm.
talking about his career. And he talks about how ever from the age of 4 he wanted to be a director, even though he came from this like small town in Germany. And then at 14 he went to Hamburg, got a little camera and started shooting. And then he basically had ended up in this Bavarian studio making these sort of 1 million Deutschmark sort of short films and commercials and stuff.
Ah,
And this film was going to be made and was going to be made, and sort of, yeah, it sort of fell through with a few people. Then he ended up on it, and it was, this big budget film. And he'd just
yeah.
done Das Boot, and that had been very successful and got lots of Oscars. And it was for him, it was just this kind of step into the unknown in a sense. And I thought it's amazing, right? Like it'd be the
Yeah.
equivalent of like say a one-time director who's done something completely different taking over Lord of the Rings. And I was like, but
Yeah.
wait a minute, that's kind of what happens. I mean, Peter Jackson made great. I mean, yes, it was special effects rich work, which is different, but very small budget indie kind of. Ugh, what would prepare you to think he could do this massive franchise? So.
No, yeah, because he did a 180 when he did Heavenly Creatures, and then he went on to the big epic. It's like he sort of went one day, oh yeah, I'm gonna make a big fantasy epic, right?
Yeah.
It's no big deal, no big deal. But from what I understand, most of the Neverending story was filmed in Germany, um, except for um, some scenes, like for example the beach where Atreyu Falls is was filmed in Spain, and some of it was also shot in Vancouver.
Hmm.
Um, so it's in Canada. So um, yeah, it's from what I understand on Wikipedia, it also says that the film was Germany's highest budgeted film of the time at the time. So it's a big deal for German productions because they don't generally have the same means as, let's say,
Hollywood
what
Productions.
Hollywood productions. Yeah, and if you take that into consideration, it's actually pretty impressive how much the film visually still holds up.
The skyscapes are amazing. I mean, that
Yeah.
black nothingness that was so evil, and now this beautiful red landscape. And
Mm.
it reminds me a little bit, actually, thinking of it now, of Tim Burton's Alice, and the way Tim Burton does these very fantastical but very dark and sinister worlds.
Oh, that's wonderful. The ivory tower.
Yeah.
Ah, it's like you sort of, this is the typical fantasy setting that you want to have, right? It's
Yeah, the
but
Emerald City on a hill.
yeah, every sort of landscape that's possible, and the backgrounds.
It's
I mean the sky.
beautiful, isn't it? This
Yeah,
purple going into red, and the music is really amazing. It's kind of this monumental 80s synth pop, but it just feels really, I don't know, kind of
right.
noble in a way.
Mm. It feels like it doesn't feel out of place. It
No.
enhances the experience actually.
In the way that The Princess Bride, it does feel very 80s and synthy and it's dated,
Yeah,
whereas here it just feels a little bit maybe like it's held up better.
yeah. Although Princess Bride is still a favorite of many people.
Oh yeah, no, and of me as well, right? I mean, I love The Princess Bride. Let's not.
In a way, I think 80s fantasy films are looked on more favorably, I guess, than some more recent examples because they are, they weren't huge box office successes at the time. I think
I think
that's
this one was kind of though, wasn't it? I
yeah.
mean,
This one, it
especially in
was
Germany.
probably the exception, but in general, fantasy films were not considered like big money making successes at the time.
No.
That's why compared to sci-fi, it's always been looked down upon
Oh, look,
as a
it's Ming
genre,
the
I think.
Merciless. No, sorry.
Yeah. And look, I mean, for example, the designs here, like the big heads and that sort of thing, it's like, you don't see that kind of inventiveness um, in today's fare. Today's fare is actually pretty standard. I'd say, you have people like you have animals and that sort of thing.
All
Like
the
when
four-headed
uh,
people.
yeah, that's, something like that, something really, really strange.
But I think today's fantasy is much more commercial because people then realized you could make money off fantasy with things like Lord of the Rings, and
And
also that you
yeah,
could make money off comics. So now all the comics and fantasy is very,
yeah,
it's very recession proof. It's very kind of done by the numbers.
yeah, it's a sort of like the standard.
I mean, this is beautiful. The guys with like half the face shed. It's
Yeah,
beautiful makeup.
yeah, it's something that you had to actually, make with uh, masks and everything. And
It's
it's like,
almost more like something out of opera or carnival, right? I
mhm.
mean, it's
Yeah, it reminds me of these sort of like Italian mask balls and that sort of thing. Like when you have like these um, yeah, people who are wearing like big dark outfits, like like capes and stuff, and you going to a masked ball or something like that. It's really elegant in a way. Um,
mm.
and here Bastian sort of realizes something. Yeah, he oh yeah, he looks at the. But Atreyu is actually, from what I understand, Atreyu in the books is actually green-skinned,
Oh, really?
which
Okay.
is weird. Um,
That would have been pretty
but
hard to pull off, I think.
yeah, but they did they? I mean, was the original actor? I don't remember. Was he um, a Native American actor?
No.
Because
Um,
in the sequels, in one of the sequels they cast Atreyu, with a Native American kid. So I'm not sure if
the name of the actor is Noah Hathaway, who, let's just have a look.
is he related to Anne Hathaway in some way.
I don't think so.
Uh,
In
it's
fairness, he might be. It doesn't say so on his Wikipedia page, but
He's an American actor,
yeah.
but
Um,
yeah,
just from the name, doesn't sound particularly Native American, but that isn't to say anything. But he never really did anything much after this and the original Battlestar Galactica.
no, he was born in California, I think.
Yeah.
So he's American, but it doesn't really say if he. Oh yeah, I think there's just something about today people would say, yeah, why not just cast uh you know what people would want to have more diversity in the fact, because of the fact that, especially Native American actors have been sort of typecast for a long time in big international productions. So
and you rarely have a Native American character who is the protagonist and the hero, and this is like a great opportunity to do so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah.
And here they are sort of discussing how to save their world. Although I would question how they would know specifically what is happening, because generally people, I mean, when something like this, I mean, when a big natural catastrophe happens or something, people generally don't really know.
But it's
what to
not
do.
a natural catastrophe, and it's got to be a setup, right? Because it's Lord of the Rings. There has to be a quest, and in order for there to be a quest, you have to have perfect knowledge of precisely what it takes to solve everything.
Yeah, someone knows the rules of what fuels or doesn't fuel the world of Fantasia in the film, and Fantastica in the book. And so Atreyu is obviously the hero within the story, but Bastian is the protagonist outside of the story, which is, I think, very interesting that they sort of at some point interact in the story of the book, at least. So I'm not sure, because it's been a long time since I've seen the film, so I don't really recall if they later get to, like, if Bastian later gets to talk to him or not. That's the thing. If he sort of knows how to
in the stories.
Yeah, with Atreyu, if he manages to communicate with Atreyu directly, like as a person in a discussion, let's say. Oh, this is wonderful.
I love this music. I love the scene where he's racing off to save the world.
Yeah, and he passes by the colorful car.
And they're like, "Yo."
Yeah, take care. Or in the horse. Oh, that probably depressed so many children.
Oh my God, that traumatized me. That I was a little girl. I liked ponies, and it was just like, what, you mean ponies can die? I think there's a lot of people who watched this film before they knew about big concepts like depression and nihilism and death, and were introduced to it by this movie. So it has to end on an uplifting note, otherwise it's basically just like traumatic.
Yeah, it's I mean, but it's still challenging in a way that I don't think modern fantasy films are. It's like, this film dares to go into certain places that you wouldn't see today, because to a certain extent family films today are more conscious of being family friendly, in a way that they are acceptable for the whole family, in a way. When you look at the Narnia or even Lord of the Rings, but Lord of the Rings sort of eases people into the sad stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
This film actually, doesn't resolve that kind of problem, other than the horse sort of meets a sad fate. And
I tend to think that there are still these movies out there, though, aren't there? Because
and in the book, apparently he talks also. It's like, you have this talking horse, dying in a swamp.
Oh my God, that's so traumatic. But I was talking recently with Matt Varley about The Witches, the Roald Dahl film, and that's just like really grim for kids. And,
Roald Dahl is generally like really. I mean, if you read the books of Roald Dahl, they're sort of like really. And they are sort of they have a message in their anti-message stances. They're unconventional in a way that takes a stand. I mean, they take stances against old tropes. For example, like, if you listen, I mean, your parents are always right, or something like that, or kids always want to do one thing, and the one thing being that they want to be with their families and that sort of stuff. And sometimes, the witches is a good example of the other scenarios that are open to explore, and it's not the most uplifting one, but I guess it's I guess it's one possibility, right?
Yeah. But there are darker kids movies out there. You've just got to really hunt for them. I think Coraline's
Oh yeah.
a very dark film, but really amazing. And actually, I mean, from what I've heard, I haven't seen it yet, Inside Out, the concept that you can't be happy all the time and don't worry about being sad on occasion, that's okay, and you
Yeah.
need the darkness to balance the light or to appreciate the light.
You need
Um,
you need sadness and what's more, I mean, more importantly,
oh shit, this is
yeah,
still
the wolf.
scary.
Yeah.
This is the scariest screen wolf.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got
Because,
proper fangs, he's got green emerald eyes, and he's just mean.
hmm Yeah, because it's sort of like this very cynical creature serving the nothing. But then how do you serve nothing if nothing is nothing?
It's like the Dementors in Harry Potter. I
Yeah.
mean, literally the black dog of depression.
Yeah. It's Moria. Uh, that's the big turtle. Or tortoise, I should say. Uh, but the deadly swamps of sadness. Oh yeah, that's that's the scene. And it's also something that I guess that's where where me watching it as an adult makes a difference, I guess, because when I watched it, I was sort of, generally, um, I'm generally a bit. I think and it's also dependent on how you're predisposed to that sort of thing. Like the idea of a horse dying in a swamp. That's not something that I would find like as an adult really upsetting in a way that probably a kid would. So me not watching it as a kid makes a difference here.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And my perspective is therefore a bit different from the
Oh
people.
my god, it's so
Yeah.
sad.
Oh yeah,
And
come
it's
on.
amazing, like it just still affects me in a really visceral way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because the kid himself at one point is just about to start really crying and begging him, trying to pull him out.
Yeah.
And as an adult, I see, yeah, it's like trying to pull someone out of depression. That you can't help them, right? I mean, they need to deal, but it's
What this reminds me of is there's a scene in another fantasy book that I read by the author who wrote Captain Blaubeer. Oh, I don't know. It's also a German book. It's called Wilde Reise durch die Nacht, which roughly translates into Wild Ride Through the Night or something like that, where you have a kid dreaming that he has to sort of do some challenges to not surrender his soul to death, essentially, to the Grim Reaper. And so one of them has to do with finding the scariest monster, and on the way he sort of meets a talking horse, and at some point the horse jumps into a river or into a lake where there's a crocodile that sort of
oh my god.
yeah. That's also that it fades to black, right? That's really
It fades to black. That your imagination does the horrible worst, and then what's even worse is you come back in on this sort of
yeah.
zoom-in shot of Atreyu basically crying, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, so now my strong and brave hero is like a quivering, crying mess. What is
Yeah.
this film?
That's
And then he looks at this
that's-
puddle, and you know that under this puddle is the dead horse.
Wait,
And then
what?
Bastian's crying. And by this point, everyone in the cinema is crying. I mean, I watched this in the cinema, like, we were all crying. Believe me, it was like a hysterical mess.
Although I would say that maybe it's a reflection of Bastian's mindset as well, because he's making the story, isn't he?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's
And he's a traumatized little child
Yeah.
of divorce, so...
Yeah. And as I was saying that in this other book, there's also a similar kind of setup where a horse. I mean, that's what it reminded me of. It's sort of a horse jumping into the crocodile, the jaws of a crocodile, because the crocodile's voice was so enticing and ensnaring and that sort of thing. It's like, and he also dies, and he's also a talking horse. So that's it's from the setup, it feels very similar.
Okay.
And that was, very, very much, that sort of thing reminded me of I was reminded of that by watching this scene, because it's like,
Oh,
what
I
is
love this
horses?
scene
you
where he meets the wise woman in the hill.
the the ancient Moria, the ancient one, which is a big
Yeah.
tortoise.
And she's kind of so cute. She's almost like a sort of wise old woman,
Yeah,
wise old granny with her knitting. Just happens to be a huge hilly mountain.
and yet the implication from, I mean, from the movie is that everything is going to be taken away. Which, I mean, I don't know if, yeah, that would obviously include her too. So it's a bit sad.
The whole thing is like a funeral dirge, right? When you really sit down and think about it.
Yeah, and the we haven't talked about it yet, but the necklace that he has.
Oh yeah, the intertwining
Right.
serpents.
Yes,
It's got a cool
that's.
name. What's it called?
Oh, I think it's called. Wait, I didn't see it. I think it's
I can
it's
Google that.
the Aurin.
That's it,
Uh,
the RN.
yeah, which is it represents sort of it's sort of meant to represent infinity, like, and that's also, I guess, something that is.
All of this has
It's
happened
important in the book
before.
because Bastian apparently gets to use it to make his wishes in the books, and that's Um, but yeah, it always I think maybe because the film had been so heavy in some ways up until the point where it ends here in the film, um, that would that if they adapted the second half of the story, I think people would have been too upset because
I was
it's
pretty upset by the original, in this bit.
yeah.
Apparently, Steven Spielberg now owns the original Orin
It's
prop.
Yes, he does, which is, to me, it's really, really fascinating because it's like you wouldn't think of that.
I think it's kind of cute though, because as a guy who made so many seminal kids' fantasy films of the 80s, it
Yeah,
shows him giving a respect to somebody else's, which is kind of nice.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, Spielberg is, you can be divided as to, how good his films are, but there's no denying how influential they were. Um, and most of them have sort of this fantasy, this aspect of fantasy to them.
I think he became, I think it's like Woody Allen or any of these great people who work over many decades. By the time they get into their second decade, you can kind of see the tropes. Even
Mhm.
with
Yeah,
Tim Burton, who I adore, you
yeah.
can almost, and Wes Anderson, you can almost like make their films by jigsaw pieces of the others. And I think Steven Spielberg definitely, the children who don't have the parents and the
Oh
sentimental
yeah.
kitsch at the end. But
Oh boy, does he have his qualities.
but
But
the original films that you watch, things like Raiders or E.T., Close Encounters, these were great
yeah,
films. Like before we all kind of figured him out
but
and knew his
but
tells.
they weren't fantasy genre films. I'd say those are more like sci-fi, aren't they? Uh,
I think E.T. treads the boundaries, doesn't it?
oh, yeah. No, in a way it does.
But
But
insofar as I think there's a lot of these early 80s films where they're set in that kind of yuppie America where
Mhm.
divorce was becoming more of a thing, and you could argue that both E.T. and Neverending Story are about little boys dealing with divorce,
Mhm.
and the trauma of divorce. So, yeah.
Well, I love it. Like he asks her, "Do you have a cold?" And he says, "We're allergic to you." And she says, "We're allergic to you." Uh,
The
it's
massive
just
snot
such an out there
fumes.
thing to say.
Yeah.
It's like such a wildly imaginative.
I
Um,
just always think of the of the turtle as a little bit like the Ents in Lord of the
oh
Ring, whereby, he's the little kid, so he's the little hobbit clambering up in the tree branches, and he's in a dreadful hurry. His world's about to an end, and he's trying to get answers and get help. And, the wise old thing is just taking its time and doing its quirky shit, and,
yeah.
it's very similar. Oh,
Oh yeah.
yeah, there you
Again,
go.
that kid must have had a fun time
Yeah,
like filming
filming
it.
this must have been very painful, I could
Oh,
imagine. Because also Wolfgang Petersen's really known for wanting to do, he likes his actors to do their own effects because he thinks it makes a big difference to how the viewer subliminally reacts to the film, like the
mhm,
authenticity, and hence also doing sort of in-screen, not CGI effects as well.
yeah. And I just think like when you look at it from the side, it's like this. It looks like this big scaled uh, model that they made. But when I went to the studios, it was, I mean, what it was, fairly impressive. As a, it was still a miniature in a way.
Mm, mm.
It's not something that I mean, it's very impressive that it visually they managed to pull it off.
Oh no, the school bell. How annoying.
Yeah, that's that annoying thing. Uh, and yeah, so now the kids are leaving. Sebastian stays behind because he wants to finish the story.
Again, always just made me amazed that no one would notice he'd gone missing.
No, but that's also something, right? It's like, isn't that partly why he's going to the library in the first place? Because he sort of feels like he doesn't.
No one cares.
Yeah, it's the idea that you're on your own, so why no one's gonna notice that you're gone, so that's part of it.
Yeah.
But in the book, it's probably, from what I understand, at least the father at least gets involved in a way that he doesn't in the film. So it's but yeah, now the scary animals,
The
and
thunderstorm and why is there a skeleton in the attic?
Weirdest library ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like sort of old Victorian costumes, and I mean the whole thing. And what is your response? Yes, let me go to an even more sort of
Yes.
ice. He goes to the school gym, right? And he hides underneath a mat from memory. No, he's back.
Yeah, he gets. Does he get a blanket or something?
Yeah, he like hides under one of those gym mats, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, so yeah, he takes courage from the fact that Atreyu is the hero, and so he has to like be the hero himself as well.
Ah, and the
The
wolf.
wolf head.
Oh my god, that's so
That's where.
petrifying.
Yeah, that's where the wolf
This
gets.
scene
Like,
is so fracking petrifying, it's unbelievable. And
yeah.
Atreyu is going to give up. It's too far to go to see the Oracle 30,000 miles away. It's a real, maybe, I mean, it's a film really about depression, isn't it?
Kind of.
Watching
Yeah,
it as an adult, like when you're just in that black pit of despair and you can't crawl out.
yeah. It's it feels like never-ending sadness. Um,
Trudging through mud. This kid must have had
yeah.
pneumonia by the end of it. And the wolf is so scary.
Yeah. I think it's the glowy green eyes that are mostly like, because that makes it stand out. Like if it was just a wolf, then you wouldn't. I mean,
It's
but
also the way the sound effects are done. I mean, the growling is really convincing.
yeah.
And the
Oh, and I
skies.
love the coloring of the sky and that sort of thing, like where the colors mix and mingle.
Yeah.
And you
Because
see
Falcor is coming. He's like the eagles, right?
yeah,
The
somewhat.
eagles are coming.
And that's also something that I feel like, when now you see a screen dragon, it just looks like a big reptile, but
It looks like a
it looks
dinosaur,
nothing like
basically,
that.
right? I mean,
The Falcor
why
looks nothing like that at all.
why shouldn't a dragon look like Falcor?
Yeah, I mean it's because like when you look at most of medieval paintings and pictures of dragons, they're mostly mixed animals types. Like you have a dog's head or a lion's paws or something like that. They are not just one big scaly reptile.
I want a Falcor.
Oh yeah, and he actually in the details, like the scales and everything that look like pearls here.
It's so beautiful.
Hmm. And yeah, it's also like
And
that's
the way they do the breathing, it's so
yeah.
like anyone who's ever had a pet dog or just the way
Mhm.
it breathes is so.
Yeah.
He's the coolest. But so Falcor doesn't have wings, right?
No, doesn't need. I mean, that's also something like.
Why should a dragon have wings?
Why should a dragon? I mean, couldn't a dragon fly just like that? Because he looks like much more like a Chinese dragon than he does
Yes.
European dragon. That's I think very interesting in a way because yeah.
He's such a mischief maker with these big Disney eyes. He's so cute. He is
Yeah.
like a dog, though. In fact, he's like a dog
Yeah,
with a sort of serpenty type body.
Yeah,
Um,
he behaves a bit, and so
And he's got like the coolest, nicest voice. Like who did the voice
Mhm.
for Falcor? Alan
Gotcha.
Oppenheimer.
Ah, and Atreyu sort of doesn't know how to react. Um,
So Alan Oppenheimer was in. What else?
he's a luck dragon. But yeah, it's also this image of wisdom, right? That's mischievous in a way.
But
Uh,
again, it's very Yoda, right?
yeah,
This
no way.
combination of deep wisdom, but also kind of cuddly humor.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's probably a way where
It's like the
you could
first time.
spin Falco's dialogue into something creepy today.
Oh,
It's with
really? Like a little
I
bit
think that when he
lascivious.
says "I like children," then people might probably say,
I like
"Oh,
children come in and give me a little tickle behind my ear.
yeah, that sort of thing." But,
Ah, the
uh,
cynicism.
but it's like that's different times, right? It's a way.
It's
It's
just
a,
kind of cute.
it's
Like,
more innocent in a way that than our cynical audiences today are used to, I guess.
and it's kind of the first time we've seen Atreyu smile
Yeah, it's also something that
and just
really,
be like a child, just not be cynical and horrible and mean.
and I think it says something that you are invested in a character who is a kid, but he's also like really stern most of the time and sad and doesn't really like. Um, Today, I think the idea would probably be a clause in a contract somewhere where it says the kid has to be happy at some point. It's like because otherwise people won't watch it
Oh
probably.
my God! So the guy who did the voice of Falcor also did the voice of Skeletor on
Ah,
He-Man and Man
oh,
at Arms. He also did
got you now,
um,
He-Man.
Vanity on the Smurfs, Merlin and the Legend of Prince Valiant.
Oh
Oh my
wow,
goodness, a lot of voice work.
yeah, another fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, and
He-Man. Oh my goodness.
He-Man. Oh my, yeah,
That's
that
a
sort of
VOC
thing.
waiting to happen, isn't it?
That's yeah. It's also like something where you say like He-Man can work, I guess, as a film, but I mean, outside of Frank Langella, there was nothing about the film version that was interesting
Yeah.
because they didn't take advantage of the premise, I guess. So it's yeah. And then now here they the pictures of the sphinxes, which are going to be relevant later in the story as well. But yeah, sm- I don't know what kind of are those. I mean, I don't remember. Are they uh are they dwarves? Are they goblins? Are they I don't know.
Who the frack knows? I mean,
Organs? I don't know.
they are quite cool though, aren't they?
Uh, Yeah, yeah, they're the old couple. It's like in every 80s fantasy film, you had to have some sort of couple argue with each other. Like I'm thinking of Time Bandits specifically, right? Where
I'm
you have
thinking of like Miracle Max and the Princess
ah,
Bride and Valerie.
that's also this. Yeah, that's um,
Living in a little hovel, kind of weird noses and ears, and kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
sort of
Have fun,
steaming potions and stuff.
have fun storming the castle. It's
Do you need
you
the
know,
chocolate? No, but it makes it go down easier.
yeah. And here, obviously, oh, he's a doctor. That's why.
Yeah, there you go. Bit more kosher than Miracle Max. And yes, there has to be the handing of a potion.
Hmm. But I wouldn't like drink any random potion that someone gave me. It's like I don't know what its effects are going to be.
So
Um,
basically, the story now is that he has to do the 3 trials to meet the Oracle, right?
yeah, I guess. And then I mean, because he has to get to the Childline Empress, right? Mhm.
Yes, yeah.
Uh,
This is
eh,
so classic.
hmm.
And they always have to be like squabbling, right? That's
Yeah. Because that's what couples are like, I guess.
yeah.
Uh, Especially old couples. Urgle and Englewood. Uh, it has a sort of Terry Pratchett kind of feeling to it, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It
it's
definitely.
definitely
Um,
much. This part is definitely more humor inflected after all the sadness.
we need it, don't we? It's
Yeah.
also a little bit Terry Gilliam, actually, in the kind of steampunky sort of, cogs and
Yeah.
whirs and
hmm
just quirky, very slightly British characters. It feels to me a little bit like him.
Although when I think of, when I think of Terry Pratchett, that's that's another thing where you realize, oh yeah, another author who's no longer around, sadly. Um, but
Yeah,
um, still
recently
very
so.
still very influential. And I'm hoping for one day that we're gonna get maybe an adaptation of of the um how many are there? 50 now?
There've been some
50
really
different
good ones on British TV by Sky, again, the satellite channel I mentioned before. They tend to do sort of two or
Hogfather
three
as well.
part ones, yeah, just before Christmas each year. They
Yeah.
did Going Postal, I think,
Mhm.
Hogfather. But the
And
ones I really
Matthieu,
want to
right?
see are the Weird Sisters ones, and I'd really love to see
Yeah.
Eric slash Faust.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourites.
Hmm.
Anything with death, basically.
Yeah, yeah, because he's such a fun character. Uh, he doesn't really feel anything, although occasionally he does. And um,
Is it Mort when he gets an apprentice?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favourite books as well.
It's also strange that there is no, there's no personification of death in the Neverending story, as far as I know, here. I mean, the nothing is the end of everything, but
Hmm.
still, it's not like there's not like there's a Grim Reaper or anything, Grim Reaper figure in the story itself. Um, because that's usually something that you would come across, I guess, in
Yeah.
fantasy stories. And oh yeah, here they have the two sphinxes, where basically he has to answer a riddle. Um, and yeah. Oh, let me see. I'm the scientist.
Yeah, and I know exactly what I'm doing with complex equipment.
Yeah. I guess one thing that people generally hold against fantasy as a genre is that there are arbitrary rules to things like, are the Sphinx eyes open or are they closed, right? Uh,
Because
because that's that sort of thing is like, why would there be a rule like that? I mean, people generally tend to look down on that because they feel like, yeah, it's sort of it sets up rules that it then explains away through arbitrary plot reasons and stuff like that,
mm,
which might come up, which might come off as a bit, yeah, it's not something that everyone can get into right away because you
okay.
you have to play by the rules. It's like a board game essentially when you are, you're asked to follow a certain
It's
number
very like
of.
Harry Potter, right? I mean, there's going to be a quest
Yeah,
and there's going to be little sub challenges, and it's a little bit like a giant board game.
in a way, but it's. I think the thing that people hold against the genre is because it sets up a world full of. I mean, an entirely separate world. Um, the rules of which you get introduced to, but it's not like you are aware of the ways around the rules from the start. Like it's like sometimes something just happens and people are meant to accept it as, oh yeah, it's a fantasy world, that's why it happens. So it's
Hmm.
but yeah, I could see that where that could be a valid complaint somehow, but that doesn't mean that it's bad or anything. I never for example, here with the Sphinxes, I at first when I watched it, I wasn't. I mean, until he said like, are the eyes open or shut? I always assumed like, I mean, I wouldn't know what exactly was going to happen. That's the thing.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
in a sci-fi story, maybe you have a more clear-eyed concept of what the possibilities are in the story. But yeah, also very significant. Like for a kids' film, this is like very imaginative when it comes to like the female. I mean, because people don't usually show breasts like in kids films nowadays, so this is
Yes.
very much like, yeah,
But it's
uh,
like classical mythology. I mean, why
yeah,
should one be prudish about it? It's
that's why.
absurd. Like, shouldn't kids at some point, like, if you're showing the brutal death of a best friend slash horse, why wouldn't you show
Yeah,
some boobies? I mean,
yeah, I
it's
know. I mean, it's like, are the kid's eyes gonna fall out or anything? Like, no, nothing's gonna happen. So it's like this is also how sphinxes generally are represented, in as statues or on in paintings and that sort of thing. So it's not like something that kids can't be exposed to it in a different context as well, right? So it's,
Exactly.
no reason to be prudish
But
about
I
it.
think it's a more maybe European attitude towards what kids can
Yeah,
and can't handle. I think we tend to be a little bit more chillaxed with just the human body.
yeah. I guess compared to American audiences, we're much more concerned about violence than we are about nudity.
Yeah.
So it's because generally that's also my thinking is like, you expose your kid to random violence, it's going to have a probably a more detrimental impact than if you expose it to arbitrary nudity in a film or something, right? So it's
Exactly.
and yeah, here we have the big glowing eyes, which are very menacing, and
Oh my god, this is so
it's,
scary.
it's running through. Yeah,
And that actually
and
still looks pretty good, like the laser beams firing.
yeah,
I mean, that still looks decent. I mean, it looks as decent as lightsabers in the original Star Wars.
hmm and at least I mean, at least here the Sphinxes have a reason for not hitting him, I guess. It's like because you have the stormtroopers shooting everywhere and never hitting anything. So it's here they just can't move. But with stormtroopers, there's no such excuse. Um, oh yeah, and yeah, she gave him an injection. So it's
Nothing dodgy about that.
no. Uh, oh, the worst one's yeah, Magic Mirror Gate. It's the same. I think it's the same thing, but blue. Uh,
Falcor is so cool.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's also something. That's when you find out like that's about self-discovery as well. Um,
Exactly.
it's like when you really see what you are, and in a way, that's probably also why the author wasn't particularly thrilled with how the film ended, because it ended halfway through the story. And yeah, you set up, that kind of idea that people are probably worse than they imagine themselves to be. And, that kind of story seems to be, in the book at least, what Bastian is going through in a way, because he has to, I guess, in the book, it sort of ends on him trying to redeem himself for what he's done in the story.
I mean, the way I
But
think
he
about
doesn't
it.
have. I mean, he has to
Sorry.
set things right, from what I understand. And but he doesn't have any memories to do it with. So it's like kind of the idea of that he has to sort of wander around, um, and without any memory of his previous life, trying to fix the problems that he created in a way.
I mean, the
Uh,
way I kind of feel about this film is that it's a young kid whose father is basically indifferent to him and the world is indifferent to him, and he takes it to mean that he's effectively worth nothing, and that
mm,
quite existential, and
yeah,
that
that's
he has no merit, and he has to create this hero that actually has some value before he can realizes that he does too. you
mm,
know and it's sometimes the biggest courage is believing that you're actually worth something. um
yeah. And it's also, I mean, on the back of the Arin, it says, do what thou wilt, right? Do what you will, in a sense that you have free choice to do whatever you want to do. But if you have free choice, that means you can still choose to do a responsible thing.
mm,
And yeah, this is the moment also where, it's relevant that that Bastian throws the book away, um, when it comes to the moment of self-discovery, right? Because it's not, I guess, not really ready to deal with that kind of thing. Um,
yeah, I mean, this is big grown up stuff, right? And he's also figuring out that, yeah, like if you've been told to believe that you're so utterly pointless in the world, that nobody loves you, that you have no worth, and then you
yeah,
realize that the coolest story you've ever read, you're actually controlling it. I mean, that's a massive, huge thing to kind of
yeah,
get your head around.
yeah. Because you're basically now told that you're basically God,
Yeah, exactly. You've gone from
that you
nothing to
can do
God.
whatever you want, and that what you want to do. I mean, if you think that everything you do is right, then that's a problem.
I'm not really
because
right, but it just is. And that's
yeah,
why, to a certain extent, I think that the second half of the story to me would make total psychological sense. That if you went from zero to hero, why wouldn't you be
abuse it
drunk on that
actually.
power and do stuff that isn't sensible and wise with it?
I guess the second film, the second Neverending Story film, sort of tried to haphazardly adapt the second part of the story, but in a way that wasn't really like according to the spirit of the book. In a way, it's like a very 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 watered down version of the original story. Uh,
Okay.
and yeah, where the implications are not as as harsh, I guess, as they would be in the book. So to me, that's always the big problem. That when once you get to the challenging stuff, there's always someone who says, well, it's too complex, and it's not going to be successful, and that's why we have to change
And
it.
also,
And yeah,
what's the motivation for making the sequel? I mean, this is a film that cost $25 million and took $100 million. So anyone who was approaching the sequel was basically approaching it as, I'm going to make 3 times or 4 times my money back, right? So they don't want the negative or the tough
yeah,
stuff.
all that pesky reflecting on yourself.
Yeah,
No,
exactly. Let's get some cool
children
action
shouldn't feel bad.
sequences.
Children don't need to feel bad. They don't need to, or feel
Deal
sad.
with tough
Just
stuff.
yeah. And here, they discover that the Empress needs a new name. And yeah, now that's where Bastian gets involved I mean, within the world of this of Fantasia. Sort of, they become aware of him. Um, and yeah, that's I mean, to me that's very interesting. Sort of that Bastian has realized before they have that he is sort of that this world is a real world that exists.
Exactly.
Um,
And it's important because
Everything is for
that's
art.
what he's adding to it. Atreyu is bringing the
Mhm.
action, but Bastian's bringing the smarts.
Yeah. Oh, and this is wonderful. I love this cloud scene, and the flying dragon.
And the
Obviously,
music.
it's just really small and insignificant compared to the big vastness of this world that's about to end. Actually,
POV flight shot, excellent.
the nothing's everywhere. That's something. That's it's sort of a line where you go. This is this is actually very very smart dialogue.
And the
Um,
idea that you can't outrun it. You can't find the one grain of sand that you're going to stand on as everything else crumbles.
yeah.
A little Lord of the Ringsy, actually, that you've got to stand and face it at some point. It's not that you can move out to the edges of the world. It's going to come and
Yeah.
find you.
At some point, it's going to catch up. So
War will
yes.
be on your land. So
Mm.
this is a little bit dated, isn't it? The kind of way they do
Ah,
the
yeah.
color tone of one shot
Yeah.
onto the other.
That's also something that you could do in the Bavaria studios, like where you could sit on Falcor and look at the screen, so you in the background see what so some kind of skies, etc. Where you could see
Mm.
yourself flying on there, which is fun. Um, but this, for instance, I still think that the landscapes themselves are very beautiful to look at, even though
Oh
I
yes.
mean it's like the Superman film. Like when he flies in the first in the first film, it's always like now you notice that it's against the blue screen or something like that. It's the effects don't hold up maybe 100%, but they don't drag down the quality of the film at all because you know the film doesn't depend on those entirely. I would say in this case, the characters and the story are what's the success of the film. Like the practical effects and everything, they are obviously a part of it too, but they're not making or breaking the film, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think it's like all these fantasy films, like they connect on a very visceral, emotional level, and then you forgive them the slightly cheesy effects, I think.
Yeah.
Or the effects that don't quite hold up, even though the majority do, I think.
Mm. Because if I look at the first Star Wars film, there are definitely some moments where you could see that this guy's wearing a costume, or
Oh yeah,
especially
for
far,
sure.
like I mean when Greedo shows up, that sort of thing, you sort of say, oh yeah, that guy's wearing a mask, but oh yeah, oh no, a tray is falling.
And that to me is basically the error that George Lucas has made. He thinks that we care, like his whole project to go back to Star Wars and tinker with everything and make
Mm.
it look perfect and for all the visual effects to be up to the latest
Yeah.
CGI mark, totally misunderstands what makes them great films. It's not that they were cutting edge sci-fi like effects of the time, although that helped. It was that we connected with the characters and the situations, and that
Yeah.
when we love something, we can definitely forgive it a lot.
Mhm. Yeah, this is why I generally don't have a problem with films like Time Bandits, or um, yeah, the Neverending Story, or or the as we talked last time, The Last Unicorn, or something like that. When something, it's not because it doesn't look like the state of the art, best quality um, animation, or the uh, best, or just because it doesn't have the best uh, visual effects, doesn't mean that the story isn't interesting or that the characters aren't compelling.
Exactly.
So it's um, because here, like, all you need to do essentially is have a character like Atreyu, and from time to time give us some kind of um, indication as to how vast the setting is, and you already got my interest, because it's
Exactly.
and Valko coming to find Atreyu is like, this is the kind of loyal friend that you want,
Yeah.
helping you out. Um, but yeah, now Atreyu is sort of lost. Yeah, I think this is where he gets to meet the wolf, right? At some
Oh
point.
God, and that's the thing. Like as much as he's got this superhero friend, the whole point is the film is that you have to man up and defeat your own fears. Like it wouldn't work if he
Hmm.
didn't do that himself.
Yeah.
Rock biter.
Oh, yeah, that's also sad. That sad moment.
Yeah,
Where he's, they look like big, strong hands, don't they?
but they're not.
Yeah.
And again, that was like when you're a kid, that's a revolutionary idea that someone who's
Mm.
big and strong isn't actually big and strong.
Yeah, because you can't fight against nothing. You can't. I mean, size doesn't matter.
Exactly.
That's
I mean,
it's
the ideas in here are really subtle, aren't they?
yeah. It's something that's rather challenging for a younger audience, I would say.
It's like I've always thought that with Lord of the Rings, the sort of the subtlety of the core idea being that Frodo fails, that at the last he also fails,
Mm.
and that it's the mercy of having allowed Gollum to live that saves them all, really, ultimately.
And Atreyu actually, because in most films you would never ever see the hero admit that he failed in his quest, right?
Of course, yeah.
Wait. Yeah, because the hero is always right because he's the hero. But yeah, that's here. That's also something like when a kid admits that they have, done something wrong. It has more. I mean, I wouldn't say it has more of a significant impact than if an adult did it, but it's certainly something that you don't see that much, because I mean, in films we tend to portray children in a way that is very idealized in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's
And we also tend to create for them idealized worlds.
yeah, and well, no,
The ground is literally shifting beneath his
yeah.
feet.
Hmm. And I like the set design here as well, like um the buildings and the columns and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very classical, actually. It really
Yeah,
is.
it seems to pull a lot from Greek imagery, I would say.
Yeah, Greek mythology. But then again, you also have the sort of the kind of the Eastern influence, like the way in which this guy is depicted here on the wall with a beard, and then the way in which Falco is depicted, and the
Yeah.
concept of a luck dragon. So, and then you have the Native American stuff. So it really is very like it pulls from all over the world, and you can see why it would be a success all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so this is where Atreyu realizes he's a character in a story.
Story, yeah. It's like that's also something that I really. I mean, I'm really fascinated by the idea of a character in a book realizing he's in a book, and
Mm.
so that if he if he goes against the author, which would be against going against the creator of the story, then by extension that means that yeah, the scary wolf, then that would mean that he essentially changes the story. I mean, that's also relevant to me in a way because George R. R. Martin, who writes A Song of Ice and Fire, has sort of sometimes said that the characters sort of develop in unexpected ways, and so he changes the story according to where he feels the characters are going. So as he writes them, he sort of lets it open to. I mean, he sort of tends to integrate changes gradually, like in a way that it feels like sometimes he doesn't map out the way the end point for the character.
Well, I
But
think lots of authors, like I was listening to an interview today with A.H. Holmes about she's just written a novel which started off as a short story that she was writing for a compilation made by Zadie Smith, and she was like, and she wouldn't admit that it wasn't a short story and then suddenly she had 700 pages and there weren't any chapters, and she said, I don't know, it just kept coming out and I couldn't really stop it, and I just had to wait to see where the characters took me. So I think that's
yeah,
for really, really good authors. I think that's probably quite a familiar sort of feeling.
yeah, when you sort of you
You're,
don't know how it's going to develop, so you allow yourself to be open-minded enough to change the story according to how you feel it it's the best way. You don't sort of write the ending first and then try to fit everything into that. You sort of try to do what's natural for the characters.
exactly.
And here he's talking to the big scary wolf, who is not. I mean, as he talks, you realize he's not actually. I mean, he's still scary, but he's much more of a quiet of a dying. I mean, he feels to me like he's a sort of tired character, like he's sort of
Weary.
wary and that sort of thing, and cynical and everything else. Um, and what is the nothing? Yeah. Um, it's also interesting to me that it says um, like the emptiness that's left, the despair that's destroying the world. Um, but at the same time, it's also something that was there before there was anything else, right? Um, like
Yeah,
what,
like
before,
this is what it all started from, basically.
yeah, because I don't know if you watch Adventure Time, the
No.
because there's an episode where a character says, before there was anything, there was nothing, and before there was nothing, there were monsters and that sort of thing. It's really the idea of what does existence actually mean? Like, what does it mean to exist? Especially if you are in this story where Atreyu is a literary character who actually has no life beyond the story, seemingly. What
Hmm.
does it mean to have an existence, right? And in the book, I think the fact that, at least in the last part, uh, Auris allows Bastian to not only make wishes, um, but it also ties him closer to Fantasia, so that he can't actually leave it. Um,
Oh, okay.
it's also something that he loses memories of his life as a human being, whilst tying himself closer and closer to um,
Which again is a little
this
bit like Coraline, right?
fantasy.
The concept that you're going to get so
Yes.
caught up in the fantasy world that you
Mm,
created because you're unhappy, but ultimately you want to get back home. Yeah.
yeah. And here it's now Atreyu has killed the wolf, um, which is Falco can also swim underwater.
Yeah, because he's a proper dragon.
Yes. Um,
Not all about the wings, people.
yeah. It's not just they
And he
also
rescues the Orin.
yeah. and here's the oh yeah, this is the wind and everything. It's just like really. This is also I guess this was also really upsetting to a kid who was watching this, right? When everything gets pulled away and Atreyu is sort of like pulled along with everything else. He can't actually do anything other than hold on to what's still there.
It's horrible. And in a way, I mean, if you want to read this as a metaphor for divorce and loss, clinging on to things, like trying to keep things, that you really just need to acknowledge their loss and move forward. And as the ultimate sort of psychobabble explanation for this film.
Yeah.
He looks really bruised and grazed and beaten up at this point of Atreyu. I wonder how much of that is like genuine from the stunt work. Yay, Falkor!
Yay.
Have you ever heard people use the word Falkor in sort of modern, like urban dictionary type setting?
Not as such, no. Have you?
Like in terms of like, oh, I was so wasted. I don't know how did he get home Friday night? Falkor. Like, is this sort of like the kind of the explanation for stuff you can't explain that's just cool and just gets you somewhere?
Oh, yeah, I see. Because I've never heard it used.
Okay.
But still.
Oh, the eagles are coming.
No, it's sort of.
And now we're in nothingness, which is really weird.
They're flying in space. Empty space. All the land is gone.
So sad. Okay, so we got Matthieu back, which is good.
Yeah.
We've just got our hero flying on Falkor and approaching the ivory tower where the childlike empress is going to be. And poor Atreyu feels he's failed, and he looks really traumatized because how's he going to explain to this amazing empress that he's not done his task and the world has ended?
Yeah, and Bastian is also not really sure how it's going to go because I feel like he doesn't really understand that he's actually writing the story as he's reading it.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, this is a beautiful shot where they're sort of outside and Trey is marching up the steps. And yeah, Falco always very supportive.
Such a beautiful set, this sort of like seashell in the stars.
Yeah.
Very classical.
I wish there was like more like this, more practical sets like this in modern fantasy settings because I feel like there's an over reliance on CG effects anyway. Oh, and here we have the childlike empress, who is played by I don't recall who she is.
She is an actress who didn't really do much. She's apparently, I think she's now or became a very famous Israeli ballet dancer.
Oh yeah,
but she's so pretty.
She's
Way too
called
much makeup, evidently. We wouldn't put so much makeup on a child now, I don't think. But
yeah, she's a Tamara Stronach.
Okay.
She's an Israeli-American dancer and choreographer.
There you go.
And so she's been in the Neverending Story. But yeah, I think that after that she didn't do anything else. She was in a 2008 film as well, but apart from Neverending Story, she hasn't done anything else. So sadly, this is the only film you'll ever see her in. Because she actually looks like if she had aged. If we had grown up with her as an actress, maybe we would have been. Maybe she would have been like the Emma Watson of the day or something like that.
Exactly. So, she's amazing because she has these very sympathetic eyes. Like, I think she's perfectly cast because her only role is to assure them that they, to give them hope and to say, don't worry.
Yeah. And it's also like the idea of, comfort. That, it's
perfect understanding and sympathy.
Yeah, which is what you need and which is what Bastian also needs.
But just way too much makeup.
Yeah.
Like, she looks like one of those kids who enter in American pageants,
In a way.
And
then...
But where did Bastian suddenly get the moody candles from?
Oh, he brought them earlier.
Yeah,
He
yeah, yeah. What else?
yeah, but yeah, that library has a skeleton and a wolf's head, so candles are not the most extravagant thing. Uh, oh, and here now the Paris is crumbling as well. Um, huh. A Neverending Story. What's that? Well, it's a successful fantasy movie, kid.
He's always so like traumatized. Trey, he just cracks me up.
Yeah.
And
Um,
she's like, "Chillax, dude.
yeah.
You brought the hero with you."
Yeah. Oh, and there's but because Bastian is so young that he doesn't really understand that this is kind of possible. Um,
Yeah,
and
because like obviously we know that this is possible for
oh
reals.
no, no, I mean but I'd say that in the sense that he's read the story, and it's yeah, in a way it's very difficult for, I mean, if you were in a situation where that was possible, like, would you believe that this was actually happening in a way where you could say, well, I could see myself accepting that in a
Mm.
in the idea that you sort of that a fictional character tells you something about yourself, which is very interesting actually, because that's
I mean, I stand
it's
ready for time travel and fantasy shit at every point in my life. So yeah.
yeah, I mean, I couldn't. I mean, just the idea of um, the fact that Bastian like decides, yeah, I'm gonna go with this, right? It's a story, it's not real. Um, that's uh, really, like, I mean, there's no way someone would ever decide, like, yeah, I'm gonna go with this premise. I'm gonna accept that I'm part of a book's story.
Yeah,
Um,
this shit happens.
yeah. But yeah, it's a fantasy story, and obviously very, it's something that tells us about Bastian in a way that he's reassured by the fictional world that he's you know it's like when people in sad moments they sort of read books to escape into a fantasy world.
Hmm.
That's what he's doing here. I think is what essentially the scene is telling us, that he's choosing to you know lose himself in a fantasy world when his real life is not the best one.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
This is quite
oh
traumatizing, actually. Like, sort of the childlike emperor's POV to the screen saying, "Save me,"
yeah,
basically to the audience, but it's Bastion, and she doesn't believe, or he doesn't believe he can do anything.
yeah, and he's so and I know that some people, I mean most people actually say that they can't understand the name that he's screaming, but it's Moonchild. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so now, I mean, I like the idea, I like the visual of the small light in the dark surroundings being the image of creation,
Mm.
of, the beginning of a new
Big
world.
Bang.
Yeah, and it's sad that if you know the story from the book, that here Bastion is essentially the hero of the story, but in the book, it's sort of like he is also the hero up until a point, and after that point, he decides, yeah, well, I'm probably more suited to do this kind of thing at the childlike empress, so I'm going to, uh, you know, usurp her position and everything else, and then transform the world in ways that I feel are the right choices, etc. So that's the. I mean, that would be a perfect villain origin story in a way, where um, and here obviously, I mean, they could. I mean, I could have accepted the fact that it's um, maybe if the sequel had been up to up to this standard, I wouldn't have minded it as much. Like now, knowing that the story is different, I kind of want to see the entire story adapted into one single film, or if you have to do it into two films,
Yeah.
because then you have the complete arc of the character as it stands. It's a very, very important fantasy film, but at the same time, I feel like there is something that they can still do, right? There's something that they could have explored and that they chose not to.
Someone should redo it as a proper.
Or maybe do it as an animated feature or something like that. If someone like Studio Ghibli tend to be much more. I mean, they tend to deal with more mature content than I think Disney
Yeah.
open to. That's I guess if I had to choose, because then you can go as wild as you want, right? In the animation and stuff. That's. But yeah, as a live action film, I think this one. I mean, this feels like a complete story, even though it's not. And I mean that's
I mean, it's
probably
the ultimate tease, isn't it? When at the end it's like, and that's another story.
that's another story, yeah.
But
But
just like I remember watching this, and when your audience as a kid, and when you see Bastian ride Falcor, it's like you've gone through the screen, and you, as the person watching,
yes,
could write. I mean, that is such a liberating feeling for a kid that
hmm
it's totally right, isn't it?
yeah,
It
it's wish fulfillment, right?
yeah.
And it's reassuring in a way because it's like
And
it's
Atreyu back on his horse.
yep,
Yay.
because he's everything has been recreated, which means that but and now he's sort of scaring the bullies away with the dragon.
Yeah, because you can now take the dragon back to your normal everyday life.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Oh yeah, wonderful.
Poor kids.
Yeah, and that's something also, but at the same time, uh, it that sad. It's to me it's sadly something also that I don't. I mean, I agree with the author that this is probably not the best ending because it feels like oh yeah, this is payback time for the bullies, but in a sense that
Well, if his book
yeah.
is all about then an abuse of power, then isn't that it? I
Yeah,
mean, this
but
isn't wise or
at
big.
the same time, the framing of this I mean, the film doesn't frame it like that in a sense that oh yeah, this is something that he shouldn't be doing. This is something I guess it's a bit more like uh, innocently mischievous in a way,
Mm.
uh, but still, oh yeah, here they have the uh, narrator, which I mean. I didn't even know we had a narrator before. But
But was there must have been one, I guess, at some point when the film was being made.
could be, yeah. And yeah, it's also Wolfgang Petersen's film.
But yeah, there's a narrator. Or maybe I wonder if this was done after test screenings for some audiences just to wrap it up nicely.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. It's just to me the idea is that I really want to see how people will react to the rest of it. It's
And
like
then back to
would they
Lamal.
understand? Would they know about would they understand the point about empathy that the author is trying to make here? That you are sort of
Yeah.
you understand the reasoning behind everything that Bastian is doing, and then it's like at some point you end up feeling, oh wait, is this not might this be the wrong? I mean, are we still like doing morally defensible stuff, or it's like this slippery slope of where you agree with a character, and some people might even go ahead and say, well, yeah, well, I defend the character's choices no matter what he does, because I'm not gonna go that far. I'm just gonna say that it feels like that kind of story should definitely be told, like where you have the hero the protagonist turn into the antagonist of the film. That I mean, because the character of Atreyu lends himself to very much a supporting in a opposing force to Bastion, I guess is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree.
um,
I
but that was the Neverending Story, which I'm glad that I revisited because it's. I mean, I've only watched it once when I was 19, so it's been 6 years or so since then. I haven't seen it, so this was to me. It's but you know
I'm
what?
glad you. I'm glad it proves the point that you can come to it late and still enjoy it, because
Yeah,
it's always hard when you watch these films that you love as a kid to know whether they're good enough in a sense to hold up to people who didn't enjoy them in that way. So it's been super fun actually. I haven't seen it for a few years, but I do watch it probably every couple of years because it really is on TV a lot.
oh really? Because
It's like the movie Labyrinth is another one that tends to creep up on,
oh yeah, we should definitely
you
do that.
know,
Oh,
obscure UK TV. And I remember the last time that Labyrinth was on, which was very recently. Um, Labyrinth was like trending on Twitter in London because you could just
mm,
tell that a whole bunch of people, probably of around my age, were just all watching it in this sort of nostalgia watch on a Sunday afternoon. And it's lovely,
interesting.
some of these films. And they don't have to have been big hits, which is what makes me even happier about it.
And what's sad about that film is that apparently the critical reception of the film at the time was not that kind.
No.
And so the director or something that wasn't. I mean, he always felt I think he felt really discouraged I mean by some of the mixed reviews, right? And the fact that it wasn't a box office hit. I mean, that's like um, it's. I mean, from what I understand, he said it's the closest. I have the quote here. It's like the closest I've seen him to turning in on himself and getting quite depressed. So it's like, sometimes if a film gets a bad reception, that definitely is some people can't it's with I mean criticism is something that is also some people need to calm down with the harshness sometimes. I feel like it's because we don't want to. I mean, if anything, the Neverending Story proves that you should definitely reward people for their imagination, like for their inventiveness, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't discourage it because people might feel discouraged if you tell them that what they've created is not good enough or is not
Not valid. Yeah.
um yeah, but we should definitely it was now that you've brought it up, we should definitely at some point try to do that one as well because
Yeah.
it's just so I mean it's David Bowie. It's like it's
David Bowie and ridiculously tight, revealing pants for a kids' film. That
yeah.
a lot of the London Twitter was was about that, and the songs really hold up as well. They're
Yeah, it's
hilarious. So
and I mean it's also like one of the films I never remember Jennifer. I mean, I never remember that Jennifer Connelly used to be that young Sarah in that film because it's like um, it's like she's done so many other films in the meantime, like Requiem for a Dream and Noah now recently, right? It's like
mm,
when you look back and you go, oh yeah, you were with David Bowie in that fantasy film. It's like it's come such a long way, but
absolutely.
that's a different story for another day, I guess. If we,
Again, unfeeling, uncaring parents, divorce. Oh,
uh,
so
yeah.
many tropes. Cool. Well,
Uh,
this was super fun. Thank you for tuning in.
Oh yeah, no, it's a film that I've been wanting to talk about for a while in a way because it's always been like in the back of my mind, but I've never been able to really discuss it with someone else because most people I know either haven't read the book or they have. I mean,
You know what? We should both commit to reading the book before the next one of these kids' fantasy films.
we should because I feel like if I mean obviously only if it's a book adaptation because for example if you were to look at the Black Cauldron from Disney
Hmm.
where it's an adaptation of the Alexander Lloyd Chronicles of Prydain, the
Yeah.
film version is so different from what the actual book is because I read the first two books um, and they are I mean it's like an amalgam of the first two.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I mean. It's difficult to talk about it in a sense. I mean, you might have to read the whole series, and that might be too much, right? So, I mean, if you really wanted to talk about differences between the original source material and the adaptation, I mean, in this case, it may. I mean, I was lucky enough that I watched someone analyze the Neverending Story, the differences between the book and the movie so that I knew more or less that the that was only the first half of the book. So that's yeah. Um,
Cool.
But yeah, we should definitely commit to reading more to the original source material, because it is interesting to see how people come away from it. Like some
Yeah,
people
and
might,
we like books, so
yeah, some people might really some. I mean, have you come across people who say, "Well, yeah, I've read the book, but I prefer the film," or do people? I mean, do you know someone who has read the book and who said,
No, I
"Yeah,
don't know
I
anyone
like the
who's read the
film"?
book, and I think it was probably a bigger deal in Germany than in England at the time.
Ah, could be,
So,
yeah.
um,
Yeah, because it would be
anyways,
interesting to me.
yeah,
Just
exactly. We should totally do that. Anyways,
anyway,
I
yeah.
better go, but
Okay.
thank you so much for joining once again, Matthias, and yeah, like if you want to hear more from Matthias, more about fantasy, then you should definitely Google VOK podcast, and you will get to lots of fun stuff therein. Otherwise, this has been great fun, and thanks for listening. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.